It all began with a flurry of emails, each one more cryptic than the last, landing in the inbox of the Washington County Child Support Office. The messages were brief, starkly worded, and claimed that Jack Bell had suddenly passed away. His demise, according to these emails, meant a large amount of child support would remain unpaid, a convenient escape from his obligations. Detective Sarah Reed leaned back in her creaky office chair, staring at the glowing screen. The emails seemed too convenient, too perfectly timed. Her gut told her something was off. She delved deeper, scrutinizing every line for clues, but the messages were expertly crafted to leave little trace of their origin. The detective's instincts were correct. After some digging through digital footprints and server logs, she discovered anomalies that suggested the emails were not what they seemed. They pointed not to an out-of-state server or a grieving family member, but circled back to an IP address right in the heart of Washington County. Reed's investigation took her to a modest suburban house on a quiet street lined with maple trees. The house belonged to Bell's girlfriend, a woman with no known connection to any deceitful schemes until now. As she approached, Reed felt the familiar rush of adrenaline. This was more than just a simple case of fraud. It was a web of deception. When Reed knocked on the door, it was answered by a man who introduced himself as John Smith. Yet there was something about his eyes that seemed eerily familiar, a flicker of recognition that didn't sit right with Reed. She pressed further, her questions probing deeper into his vague responses. Back at the station, the pieces began to fall into place. John Smith was none other than Jack Bell himself, alive and well, hiding in plain sight. The virtual court appearance had been audaciously staged from this very house. Detective Reed knew she had enough to confront Bell with the truth. But just as she began drafting her report, another email pinged into her inbox, the same cryptic signature as before. This time, it warned her to leave well enough alone, hinting at consequences if she pursued this any further. Reed felt the cold prickle of unease creep up her spine. Was someone else involved? Was Bell merely a pawn in a larger game? As she stared at the ominous message on her screen, she realized this case was far from over. The chapter closed with Detective Reed facing a decision: follow the law and risk crossing an unseen adversary, or heed the warning and let sleeping dogs lie? In that moment of hesitation, she knew, whatever lay ahead, it would not be simple. Detective Sarah Reed sat at her desk, the ominous email still glaring from her computer screen. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, itching to type out a response, but she knew better than to engage in a digital confrontation. Instead, she printed the email and added it to the growing file marked Bell Case. Determined to unravel the truth, Reed leaned back in her chair, replaying her encounter with John Smith in her mind. The moment she locked eyes with him, she felt a gut punch of recognition. The man standing before her was indeed Jack Bell, alive and defiant. Now, with this new threatening email, it was clear that someone else was pulling strings from the shadows. She decided to loop in her partner, Detective Mark Alvarez, known for his keen intuition and unwavering loyalty. Alvarez listened intently as Reed recounted her findings and shared the unsettling message. "We need to find out who's behind these emails," he said, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. Bell might be more than just a deadbeat dad trying to dodge child support. Together, they revisited Bell's last known whereabouts and dug deeper into his connections. They scoured through public records and social media profiles of everyone tied to him: friends, family, acquaintances, hoping for a lead. Each discovery only added layers of complexity to the case. Their investigation led them to a dimly lit bar on the outskirts of town, one that Bell was known to frequent before his supposed death. As they entered, the smell of stale beer and cigarette smoke clung to the air. Reed scanned the room until her eyes landed on a group of men huddled in a corner booth. One of them was Jerry Thompson, an old friend of Bell's who had been conspicuously absent from recent gatherings. Thompson had always been a wild card, loyal yet unpredictable. Alvarez approached him with caution. "We need to talk," Alvarez said firmly as Thompson looked up mid-laugh. His expression shifted from amusement to suspicion as he recognized the detectives. "About what?" Thompson replied coolly, taking a swig from his bottle. Reed leaned in closer. Jack Bell. The name hung heavy between them. Thompson hesitated for a fraction too long before replying. Haven't seen him in months, but his eyes betrayed him, darting nervously toward the exit. We know he's alive, Reed pressed on, and we think you know more than you're letting on. Before Thompson could respond, there was a commotion at the bar's entrance, a figure hurriedly slipping out into the night. Reed caught a glimpse of the back of their head, a cap pulled low over their face. But it was enough. That's him, she exclaimed, adrenaline spiking as she and Alvarez bolted for the door. They burst into the alley, but it was empty, just the faint echo of footsteps disappearing into darkness. Breathless and frustrated, Reed turned to Alvarez. This isn't just about child support anymore, she said grimly. There's something much bigger at play. She could feel it, a sinister web tightening around them all. Detective Sarah Reed and her partner, Detective Mark Alvarez, stood in the dimly lit alleyway, hearts pounding from the chase. The elusive figure had vanished into the shadows, leaving them with more questions than answers. Reed's mind raced, piecing together the fragmented clues surrounding Jack Bell's fake death and his broader intentions. We need to regroup, Alvarez said, breaking the tense silence with a nod back towards the bar. There's something we're missing here. Something right under our noses. Back inside, they confronted Jerry Thompson again, whose demeanor was now visibly shaken. He fiddled with his drink, eyes avoiding theirs. Look, he finally muttered. I don't know where he is now, but I do know Bell was talking about some big score before he disappeared. Reed pressed further. A score? What do you mean? Thompson hesitated, his loyalty to his friend hanging in the balance against his own self-preservation instincts. Something about a stash of cash. He was always going on about it. Said it could set him up for life. Reed exchanged a glance with Alvarez. This wasn't just about dodging child support. It was about something larger, something potentially criminal that Bell had planned all along. As they left the bar, Reed couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Her instincts tingled with a familiar unease as she scanned the surrounding area for any sign of movement. Let's head back to the station, Reed suggested, eager to dig deeper into Bell's connections and uncover this so-called big score. But as they turned the corner towards their car, a crumpled piece of paper caught her eye. Bending down, Reed unfolded it carefully. Scrawled across the page in hurried handwriting was an address and a time, tonight at midnight. Think it's his? Alvarez asked, peering over her shoulder. Only one way to find out, Reed replied, slipping the note into her pocket. The hours ticked by slowly as they waited for midnight to arrive. The address led them to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, a fitting scene for whatever clandestine operation Bell might be running. As they approached, shadows danced in the moonlight, filtering through broken windows. Reed's pulse quickened as she and Alvarez moved silently towards the entrance. Inside, the air was thick with dust and tension. Voices echoed from deeper within, Bell's unmistakable drawl among them. They crept closer until they could make out the conversation. Gotta move fast, Bell was saying. Once we get our hands on it, we're set. Reed motioned for Alvarez to split up and flank Bell from both sides. As they closed in, her foot caught on a loose board, sending it clattering across the floor. Silence fell like a shroud as Bell turned towards the noise. Seconds stretched into eternity before chaos erupted, Bell bolting for an exit while others scrambled to follow suit. Reed sprinted after him, determined not to lose him again. She burst through a side door just in time to see Bell leap into a waiting car. But as he sped away, headlights illuminating his path, she caught sight of something or someone in the passenger seat. A shadowy figure whose presence sent chills down her spine. There was more to this than met the eye, and Reed knew she just glimpsed a piece of a much larger puzzle. Detective Sarah Reed's heart was still pounding as she and her partner, Detective Mark Alvarez, sped back towards the station. The image of Jack Bell speeding away in that car, with a mysterious figure beside him, played on a loop in her mind. The weight of the case now felt heavier than ever. Child support was just the tip of the iceberg. As they reached the station, Reed immediately got to work. "We need to track that car," she told Alvarez. They pulled up traffic cameras and scoured through footage, hoping for a glimpse of Bell's escape route. Time was against them, each second ticking away with Bell and his accomplice getting further out of reach. Meanwhile, Detective Alvarez was on the phone with the Washington County prosecutor, arranging for an emergency court order to seize Bell's known assets. "If we can't catch him on the run," Alvarez argued, "we'll cut off his resources." Back at her desk, Reed pieced together everything they had so far: the emails, the fake death, the whispers of a hidden stash. Each clue pointed towards a larger conspiracy. But who was pulling the strings, and why? Just then, her phone buzzed. A message from the prosecutor's office. "Court hearing in 30 minutes. Virtual appearance required." Reed's eyes widened. It was time for Bell's scheduled appearance. But this time, things would play out differently. In a dimly lit courtroom somewhere across town, Jack Bell sat in front of a webcam, an unconvincing backdrop of palm trees behind him. He wore a relaxed expression that was betrayed only by a slight twitch in his jaw. As the judge entered the virtual session, Detective Reed and Alvarez joined from their office. They watched intently as Bell tried to maintain his facade. But just as he began his rehearsed alibi about being out of state, there came a knock at his door. The tension was palpable as the detectives on site moved in simultaneously to apprehend him. They knew Bell's every move was being mirrored by their own colleagues standing just outside his Indiana residence. "Mr. Bell," the judge called out sternly through the monitor, "it appears you're not where you claim to be." Moments later, live footage from outside Bell's home appeared on screen, officers knocking on his door as he looked visibly rattled. Caught in his web of lies, Bell had no choice but to confess as officers barged into his home and took him into custody right before everyone's eyes. Reed breathed a sigh of relief, yet knew this wasn't over. The mysterious accomplice and that elusive big score still loomed large. "We've got him for now," Alvarez said quietly beside her. "But that shadowy figure, there's more we need to uncover." The chapter closed with Detective Reed staring at her computer screen once again. A new email had arrived. This time it promised retribution for meddling too far into affairs that were not hers to uncover. Detective Sarah Reed sat in her office, the soft glow of her computer screen illuminating the room. Her mind was a whirl with the latest developments. Jack Bell was finally behind bars, but the shadowy figure in the car with him remained a mystery. She could feel the weight of the unresolved aspects of the case pressing down on her. Reed knew there was more to uncover, and this latest email only confirmed it. "You're in over your head," it read, a cryptic threat that made her pulse quicken. She leaned back, eyes scanning the ceiling, as she pieced together what she knew. Bell's attempts to dodge child support payments were just part of a larger scheme. Later that day, Reed and Alvarez met with the Washington County prosecutor to discuss their next moves. "We need to get into Bell's communications," Alvarez insisted. "There's got to be more there. Whoever's helping him is still out there." As they sifted through Bell's phone records and emails, a pattern began to emerge: an encrypted messaging app, one frequently used by those wishing to keep their conversations private. With a warrant secured, they cracked into it, revealing messages between Bell and an unknown contact. "Meet at the docks," one message read, accompanied by a series of numbers, coordinates. The pieces were falling into place. This was likely where Bell had planned his big score. That night, Reed and Alvarez coordinated with local law enforcement to stage a covert operation at the docks. The air was thick with anticipation as they positioned themselves strategically around shipping containers and rusted cranes. Just after midnight, headlights cut through the darkness, a convoy of vehicles approaching cautiously. Among them was the very car Bell had escaped in just days before. The team moved swiftly as figures emerged from the vehicles, unloading crates under the moonlit sky. Reed's heart pounded as they closed in, apprehending several individuals but not finding Bell's mysterious passenger among them. However, hidden within one of the crates was something far more valuable than cash, a cache of documents detailing fraudulent schemes and connections to high profile figures in Washington County. The operation had been larger than anyone had anticipated. The documents were a gold mine of evidence, linking Bell and his associates to financial fraud on a massive scale. Back at the station, as dawn broke over Salem, Reed stared at the array of confiscated evidence spread across her desk. The case that began with false death claims and child support evasion had unraveled into something much bigger. Yet, despite their success, one question lingered. Who was truly behind all this, and why? The chapter closed with Reed resolving to dig deeper into this conspiracy, a journey that promised no easy answers, but was necessary for justice.